Okay, we're gonna get started. I'm gonna go without. So I just want to welcome everybody to this evening's lecture. This is the last lecture this year in our Art Talk series. I'd like to just say a quick thanks to the ASCC for the funding to put the series together. Also, I'd like to remind people to silence their cell phones or turn those off if you haven't already. Tonight, we have, for the first time, we have a collaborative group that's working together that's here to talk a little bit about the way that they work and the projects that they've done over the past 14 years of working together. We have John Sutton, Ben Beres, and Zach Culler, who go by the name of BeresSuttonCuller. They met as undergrads at Cornish College of Art in Seattle and have been working on performance-based installations ever since. And so please join me in welcoming these great artists from Seattle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. It's great to be here. I'm Ben Beres.
I'm John Sutton. Hi, I'm Zach Culler. And it's really nice to be in Vancouver. Thanks to Senesi for inviting us down. So we've all been working together for the last 14 years in the fields of sculpture, performance, public art, and kind of pull each other in a lot of different directions, which is what initially started us collaborating.
We're going to kind of breeze through the first few years of our collaboration.
So as we were working together in the beginning in the sculpture lab, we were all kind of working on large individual projects. We were pulling each other in to kind of help hold something or clamp something or be a model or whatever it was. And we just started talking about different things. And we had this opportunity to do this outdoor sculpture festival. And we kind of went out individually thinking that we were going to work on different projects, and we started collaborating, and that led us into a year of pretty intensive studio production. So we had a studio, and we were creating something every other week. So we'd have a couple of days to conceptualize something. We can build this in a few days. We'd have a little opening, and then the next week it was tearing it down and kind of starting that process over. And that taught us a lot about collaborating.
We were also responding to how people entered space, reacted to space. We really liked giving people decisions and letting them choose and touch and feel. Something that we really loved about art, which you go to a museum, you can't pick the painting up or a sculpture up, and we really wanted people to be able to interact with what we were doing.
So this is a piece that we did at Consolidated Works. The year of installations that we built in the studio sort of led up to this piece. This was done in 2002, and we called it New Installation. And it's just sort of this maze of spaces, or a maze in the space where you had these choices, how you were going to navigate through the space, whether you're going to go left or right, and make your way through this maze. And then as you made your way through it, you encountered all of these different sculptures, some of which were interactive, some of which weren't. And so we were sort of testing that boundary, if the viewer would know what they could start to play with and what was sort of hands off.
And a lot of times they didn't.
This was our first piece that we took outside, kind of into the public sphere. We were really interested in making public art that was kind of non-sanctioned, that was actually engaging the public and kind of hitting the road. And so this was that first piece, and it was called Trailer Park. And we had a little flatbed trailer, and we planted grass and a tree, and it had a little fountain, stone paths. Everything was alive and growing. We trimmed it with scissors, and we toured it around more blighted areas of King County for a couple of years. And it was a really great piece. We would set it up and just kind of walk away and have coffee across the street, or just kind of admire people, sitting on this thing. And that was where we were kind of realizing that as with any painting or any work of art, the viewer completes it. You bring your own meaning or your own understanding to it. And for us, we were seeing the works that we were making for the first time when somebody would sit on it or engage it or play with it or touch it. And so it was nice to be able to just kind of create something and then to be surprised with people's interactions.
This is another mobile piece called Stand Up Van, And it's half of a van that is outfitted with a series of hydraulic jacks, and so it can be towed and then lifted up on end. And so it sort of creates this mobile monument where you tow it around. It's sort of this pedestrian object, but then you jack it up on its side, and all of a sudden it becomes this sort of monolith.
This is a piece called Labor, where we hired some day laborers, and they part of a show called Residents, where they were working from a series of plans, and they would make these little houses and send them down a conveyor belt. And then another thing that happened kind of unexpectedly is people at the show would come and they just took the houses home with them.
This is part of that same show. We had a residency for many months in the back of the space, and we're creating works that were all kind of playing with the idea of home and what it means to have a residence or be in residence. And so this was Tall Boy with Girl. It was a large 12-foot tall cabinet, kind of traditional cabinet that had a hidden compartment underneath with a performer. There was a dancer inside. And so in this image you can see, it's actually really dark in here, but there's legs sticking down. It looks better on this screen. But it was kind of that same thing. So when somebody would come into the show, we kind of created these things that people would have these unexpected moments. And so for those that were curious enough to look underneath this piece of furniture, well, why is it so tall? Why is it so big? That they were surprised with this complete action, this choreographed movement. That led us into doing a body of work that's ongoing. It's our longest standing body of work, and there's Sears portraits. We've been going to mostly Sears, but since they've closed their portrait studios, and having our picture taken fairly regularly, thinking of ourselves as family and what that means.
We now go to JCPenney.
So these are really nice kind of quick things that we can be really busy working in the studio, and we can go and spend $9.99 on a portrait package and have something kind of completed for us. And it's been a really fun process. It kind of lightens up a heavy day. It feels really productive. And then as we kind of look back at the history of us over a long time, they just keep growing. And this is our favorite one to date. These are our dads and us.
The last time we showed this, someone thought we photoshopped ourselves to look old. But we're like, no, those are our fathers.
And Jerry is in the house. So.
Give it up for Jerry, everybody.
This is we did our first residency at a place called the Bemis Center in Omaha, Nebraska, and it was the first time that we had all left home way of working. We kind of went there with very specific ideas of what we were going to make and what we were going to do, and we got there and all of that threw out the window. And this was a really formative experience for us, doing this residency and kind of discovering what it meant for us to be away, and kind of we changed the way we've worked ever since. But we started doing more photo-based work and creating prosthetics and masks and bringing performance into the sculpture.
This was a way too that we all have different skills and different things that we bring to the group, and so using some of Zach's sculptural skills into the movie making magic and mold making for the masks, we got to develop these other characters in like kind of a further sussed out way. And that kind of led into the natural progression from there was to go to the stage. And so our first piece on the boards was called 9 to 5, and it led into 10 to 6. And it was a series of, John is an old man named Earl Grey, and it's a 20-minute piece where there's 18 people on stage, and it just goes through a little vignette of his life as a young man.
This piece is called 3-Day Weekend, and this is, I think, an example of when we're sort of left to our own devices in our studio with no deadlines. For this piece, we took a travel trailer, completely deconstructed it, moved it into the studio, raised it 10 feet off the ground, and then and reconstructed it with a glass bottom. We incorporated some kinetic elements into it and some sound and some video. But after it was all built, we had a series of performers come in and do these sort of mundane performances over the course of a weekend. And so everyone came into the studio and viewed it from below. And this was just as interesting to us because we had been working on this thing for months, but it wasn't really complete until these performers got in there. And so we were down there with everyone else sort of watching this mundane performance night after night.
And people came each and every night that it was happening because it was a different group of different family units standing in there. And what surprised, I think, all of us is that people would not just come and look and see what was different, but they would stand there for 3 hours at a time just watching people have a little vacation. It was right around the beginning that like reality TV and all that took off. This was in 2004 or 5. And then, 5 years later, that's all that people are doing is sitting there watching television, watching people do what they normally do. And it was a really fascinating kind of revelation. This is Eli. He was the only person that broke the glass barrier. When you were in the trailer, it was the way that it was lit and it was so dim outside that it just kind of reflected everything back up. And so you could be in there and you were pretty oblivious of everything that was going down on you. But he put his face to the glass and then just kind of stayed there like glue for hours.
Mom, there's people down there. This is a piece we call The Island, and we shipwrecked ourselves on a cartoon island next to the 520 floating bridge on the last day of summer. And the police boat showed up pretty early in the morning, and someone thought that there was a boat that had capsized, and there were 14 fire trucks waiting for us. And so we were having a great time drinking rum out of coconuts and waving at the news helicopters, and then the wind picked up and our anchor snagged, and we had to be rescued from our desert island.
This is another mobile piece called There Goes the Neighborhood, and it's a slice of a house that we would tour around to different neighborhoods and park and set up the barbecue and just kind of move in for an afternoon and barbecue and invite people over. And it was pretty much that simple. We were doing what we would normally do in a living room, but we were out on the street. We were very exposed.
We had this through the King County Performance Art Network, and a couple times there would be a group of people that would show up and like stand there and wait and say, "When's the performance start?" And we're like, "Well, this is it. You want a burger?"
Yeah. Unfortunately, it burned down, and it was a fitting end to a piece that said, "There goes the neighborhood." This is the first part of a piece. We were approached by Scott Larimore, who started Larimore Project, which was a independent, kind of ambitious gallery in Seattle in 2006. And we were going to be the first show. And he was like, "I'm going to be building it out, but I can't open up the space until basically the day of the opening." And what we really wanted to do was a large installation in the front room. That's why we were working together. That's why he approached us. But he offered this big, beautiful space and said, "Well, you can't really do an installation because it opens, like I'm going to be putting up drywall and finishing the screws until the day that I said I was going to open." So our proposal, or our solution, was to create this 32-foot by 32-foot by 12-foot tall crate. Inside of that crate was all of the materials that we were going to build said installation with. And so for the first opening, his soft opening, we had this object filling up that main space and some other artworks in the back. And then 3 weeks later, this kind of happened. We built a full-scale, semi-functional Chinese restaurant. And it was based on all of the architecture in the surrounding neighborhood and what we had been eating for lunch and dinner for 5 days a week as we were helping to build out the gallery. And so it was kind of like all of the different elements were taken from that neighborhood, from things that we found really kind of attractive.
And this was a nice exercise in trust because the gallery dealer had no idea what we were building and no one else did. So you could come in and you would hear the noises, you would hear sawing and us talking, but there was a lot of buzz around what's going on inside this box.
And we had set up 2 acquaintances on a blind date for that first opening, and so they were both comfortable acting, but they knew what the scenario was going to be. And so again, we kind of gave that up to them. And so they were, for 4 hours for the opening, full on engaged and having conversation while people were kind of walking around and looking at all the details, and they didn't break character at all.
They ate a ton of Chinese food.
Yeah. And then for the run of the rest of the exhibition, people would come down and have lunch in the space. It's the first incarnation of a piece that we translated into this, and it's called Homesick. We had been making a lot of work around the idea of home and family, and we felt like it was time that we kind of moved on. And so we did this kind of sickly version of it. It was kind of half sinking into the gallery floor, the lights were kind of fading in and out, and it had this heavy breath, and it was kind of like putting something to bed. And it's not, anyway. So this was our way of trying to kind of separate ourselves from some of our past work to make a nice sculptural gesture and think about doing different things.
This was an installation we did for the Northwest Biennial at the Tacoma Art Museum, and this was called Ship in a Bottle. And this is sort of an example of a project that came about just from the parameters, where they said, we want this big, large gesture, and we want it in this courtyard, and we want it to sit on top of this piece. It's called Stone Wave. It's in the atrium. So if you can do some grand gesture in here, that would be great. And if you can fit it through this little 3x5 door, you do that as well. So we came back to them and proposed that we have this sailboat craned in and set in the middle of this space in the Tacoma Art Museum, and they went for it. So we ended up outfitting it with we sort of plumbed this system of with a fog machine that would sort of create this atmosphere around it. So it was sort of pumping out this mist, and set up some pneumatics to actuate the rudder to sort of make it move around, and so that was the piece. This piece is called Peapod, and it's a mobile miniature stage. We built it out of an old luggage carrier, and spent a lot of time fiberglassing it and having it sprayed in an auto body booth, and we tricked it out with a bunch of LCD screens and electronics and CB radio and sort of karaoke gear, and so people could get in there and perform.
This is our first permanent, commissioned public art project, which we've learned a lot from. We're still learning a lot from it. But we were approached we applied for a call for public art from the city, and it was for the streetcar, the extension from South Lake Union to downtown. And it was a very specific call. They wanted art that engaged the public, but it had to happen on the sidewalk plane. It couldn't stick up. They had already built the stations, but they wanted something that was engaging. But they were only saying you could make something on the sidewalk surface. And so we were thinking about what that meant, and do we decorate the sidewalk, do we stamp it, do we do tiles, and we really wanted to make something that was somehow more significant than that. And so the proposal, and what we ended up doing, was we created a 8-foot tall neon double helix, and we dug a big hole, and we put in a big pipe in the ground, and did a custom glass manhole cover over it. And so it's got a depth to it and a mirror on the bottom, and so it looks like it goes down forever. It's a DNA double helix, and so it spirals down, and then the steps in it are animated, and so it looks like it's constantly spiraling down, so it's sequencing on and off. And part of the concept from that came from the streetcar and South Lake Union and the biotech industry, and all of this infrastructure was being built largely because of South Lake Union's transformation from warehouses and blue collar to biotech and the Fred Hutch and all of those different things. And then we were thinking about the city infrastructure and the drainage and everything going down the drain and out to the sound, and so it's like out of sight, out of mind, and we wanted to draw attention to that. And so the DNA and what you put down the drain and all of those things was kind of like why we're in this to begin with. So we wanted to make some piece that subtly referred to that. And it was really nice because you were able to, like, it's a fairly big thing, but unless you were standing right over it, you didn't see it at all. And so it was kind of a way to make a piece of public art that was really intimate at the same time.
And so our second piece with the city, this is cited in 2 different places in Seattle, is called Salon. And again, it was a sidewalk project. And we took molds of ornate frames and stamped these picture frames in the sidewalk plane, and then did acid etching and sealant. And so the neighborhood, the people in the neighborhood would take sidewalk chalk and kind of use these as picture planes, portraits, and whatnot. And so these were always kind of changing, and you know, each neighborhood had kind of a different characteristic to it. This is a piece called Wondercomer, and this was in the San Jose airport, and it was up for a couple of years. We made this big Wondercomer that was kind of jokingly to us the hub of the main airport. We were asked to respond to the past, the present, and the future of the city of San Jose and Silicon Valley. And so we took all these computer parts and kind of mashed them up, made a bunch of bugs and flowers and fruit, and kind of created this pseudo flora fauna hybrid.
We wanted it to kind of refer to the past of that, but we wanted it to look like this really white, modern, sterile airport was kind of built around this one last vestige of that place. This is called Panoptis, and we were asked by the Henry Art Gallery, which is part of the University of Washington, to do a really interesting kind of curatorial project. And so not just making a work, but they wanted us to go into their collection and to create a work in response to that. And so the Henry is a collecting institute, and as part of their mission, they have to display that collection periodically. And so they tasked us with that idea, and our project was to create this large robot with which mediated your arts experience. And so there's a large track. I thought one of those was a video. There's a track that kind of travels around the room. We picked 150 objects roughly from the collection for various reasons. And there were 2 ways to look at it. It was hung floor to ceiling, salon style. You couldn't ever really see all of the work up close and in person. It had this large machine kind of traveling autonomously in front of it. And then in another gallery on the other end of the museum was, on the bottom right, was this joystick and high definition monitor. And so that camera was traveling around, and it was capturing a very small slice in high definition. And so you were seeing the cracks and the hairs that fell off the paintbrush and all of these details that you really can't see with the naked eye. But when you were looking at the works themselves, you really couldn't see anything because of the way that it was dimly lit. And so it was thinking about how we look at art nowadays. Like, we see so much more, we're exposed to it via the internet in a JPEG or a low resolution image, but we're exposed to so much more information and so much more content than we ever would have been. But what's mediated, it's through a computer screen. It's never going to take the place of the real thing. So we wanted to make something that was kind of playing with that duality. And it wasn't until you walked through the entire museum that you saw that this robot was being controlled by this thing. Or you would encounter one or the other because they were at opposite ends. So. Your turn.
This is called Painting or Puzzle: A Painting in 150 Parts. And so we were sort of playing around with the idea of collective ownership of one painting. So to make this piece, we laser cut out a jigsaw puzzle that is actually fully assembled. It is 6 feet by 9 feet. And each piece was cut out of plywood blank that was 11 inches by 14 inches. So we assembled the puzzle and then created a painting on it, and then broke it all apart and put each individual puzzle piece back in its blank. And then it turned into this addition of 150, but each piece was unique. And so the idea is that 150 people or thereabouts can own this one painting, but no one really knows what this painting is. They're just sort of owning a small piece of it. And so I think this was 2011 that we debuted this one. And so in 2021, we're going to bring all these pieces back together and assemble them, and so everyone can see exactly what the painting is that they bought.
Kind of, I mean, we started playing with this a little bit more, but kind of like you're a shareholder in something. You own a portion, a piece of that. This is an earlier version of it. This is a proposal image for a piece that we did called Ties That Bind, and that was it actualized. And so this is in the North Capitol Hill area of Seattle. There were these 6 kind of historic homes that were all going to be demolished to make room for a big, modern, complex, high-rise, mixed-use thing. And they were all, attractive and charming in their own thing, density versus preservation, all of those issues surrounding it. But what we were really interested with is that these things were going away. In the neighborhood, the dynamics were changing, and we were really interested in exploring that. We also had a very short period of time with which we could install. These were going to be, we had like a couple days to install, that was going to be up for a month, and then they were going to get torn down. And so our solution was to tie these houses together. We got 12,000 feet of custom ratchet strapping, and it's the load binders that you tie down on your truck. Wrapped the houses, poked holes through walls, went through windows, up over chimneys, and just slowly and continuously put pressure on these things. And it was about sight lines and good and bad neighbors and family. But it was this really great way of working large and quick. It was kind of, this is supposed to be a video. That's not working. I'm sorry. But it was kind of 3-dimensional drawing. We were just kind of working really intuitively, and we had a big lift, and we were kind of up and diving through places and connecting. So, new video.
And then we did another larger piece on the stage on the boards, and they have a dark period during the summer months, and so they let us have kind of a residency where we went in and imagined using the whole space. We had the dressing rooms, the basement, the lobby, both upstairs and downstairs theaters. And so we're also trying to, with a limited budget, spend our money wisely. So we started culling actors and material from Craigslist, from free sections, calls on Facebook. And so most of what we have in the show was culled from Craigslist. We also wanted the theater experience not to be where you come in and sit down and just expect to have the curtains open and watch a show. There were performances that were happening right next to you that a light would turn on and a microphone would drop. All of a sudden, someone's singing next to you, or someone would grab you and take you upstairs, and there would be a birthday party for you. So there was a lot of like crazy different things happening where you could never actually see the entire show because there was something happening all around.
Yeah, as you enter on the boards, that space, the first thing you do is you walk into the theater and you grab a seat. And so spent a long time trying to figure out how to prevent people from doing that, from just walking in and sort of sitting in the bleachers. And so we ended up
crashing an airplane.
Getting permission after a bit of a struggle, but they eventually agreed to let us rip up all the seating if we promised to put it back exactly how we found it. And we crashed this plane into it, and it had a little poof of smoke coming out from a fog machine,
and that's part of the process too. Is like that was one of the first things. Like it'd be crazy to like just smash a plane into these seats. They're bothering us, and then we work through all these other ideas, and we come all the way back to putting this plane into the seats.
Wrong way. So this is a piece called Work in Progress, and we were asked to do a piece that we were teaching sculpture at Cornish, which was really an honor to be invited back. It was about a decade after we graduated, and so we were teaching sculpture. It was really fun. It was in a new campus, a new building. Everything was different, but we were asked while we were there if we would do a project in the gallery, and we didn't have logistically any time. We were just finishing up that last piece on the boards, and so what we proposed is, all right, we'll get a bunch of sheetrock and a bunch of drywall, and we will build something. It will be a work in progress. And so the idea was that we had a curved track that spanned. It was a really long, skinny gallery. So this is a curved track that runs the length of the gallery. On it is mounted a time-lapse camera. And we had calculated that over the run of the exhibition, over the month, that the camera and the motor will carry that thing from one end to the other. And it'll be shooting photographs every 30 seconds or something. And so for the run of that, it will document the progression of what we're building. And we started at one end of the gallery with a finite set of materials, and we just started building intuitively. We didn't have plans, we didn't know what we were doing, and it was just kind of playing with materials. But it was sheetrock and lumber and drywall. Well, sheetrock is drywall and mud. We're kind of playing with these sculptural forms and building, and as we would get to a certain point, we would start cannibalizing. It was the snake eating its own tail. We would start having to tear it apart as we were moving to build the next piece. And so the material was not as nice or as square or as true, and it was just fun. We were in there every day. And just let this play while we're talking through it. So we got to kind of explore that. It was, in many ways, the On the Board show that happened before was a very specific outcome, and we had to figure out how to make that happen. And this was much more freeing because it didn't really matter what we were building as long as we were working. And we were thinking about ourselves, the artists, as like cultural labor, that we're getting paid pennies to spend all of our time and resources to make these things, and we just felt like we were laborers, going back to the day laborers that we hired for one of those early pieces to build those houses. We felt like we were in that role, and it was a really kind of humbling experience.
Pretty music.
It's good music. Our friend made this. Just go to the end, skip forward. Is this even the final?
No, it's not the final.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was the final. So, at the end of that, because the materials were getting more and more deteriorated, this thing turned into a little animation video, and like it kind of did swallow its own tail. And we had a lot of fun creating a piece that I guess now you'll have to go online and see. So, oops.
So this is an installation shot of a piece that we did at a gallery called Land of Tomorrow in Louisville, Kentucky. And we called this Small Moons. And it was a jumping off point from the On the Boards piece that we did To Be Determined, where we sourced all of our materials from the community and Craigslist, and sort of spent months prior to the installation amassing all of this junk. And so it's just all the stuff that people had in their garages and their basements that they were going to get rid of, take to the landfill, take to Goodwill. And so we just collected it, and we built these geodesic spheres, all different diameters. The largest one was 13 feet in diameter, down to about 4 feet in diameter. And over the course of about 6 weeks, we started just adding all of this detritus and junk to these armatures. So the whole installation ended up being self-lit. So there were no gallery lights. Everything was sort of lit by lamps that were rolled up in this thing, and TVs, and just whatever, anything that had a plug on it, we tried to plug in and get it going. So there's a time lapse of our installation process.
And it was a really nice way to do a portrait of a community, really, through their things. We had made one in Seattle, and it was completely different objects and characteristics than the things that were in Louisville. And we imagine, doing one in South America versus New York City. Like, they could all be very different with very geographically tied to objects.
It's also a really, one of the things that we struggle with is we like to create large works and make things that are site-specific, but traveling somewhere and building with a lot of materials, this is a great way to kind of not be generating waste. We were just using some PVC. We were taking things out of a waste stream, cleaning them up. We cleaned them a ridiculous amount, and then putting them back out there, donating them to the Goodwills or things along those lines. And so we were a little bit more aware of how we're able to travel and make something large but not have to ship things all the way across the country or be buying materials that are one-time uses. So we'll occasionally do odd jobs. And this was a commission for a law firm in downtown Seattle, and they wanted to hire an artist to design their desk for their new library. And so, you know, as artists, you have to figure out how to make ends meet sometimes. And this is a really exciting opportunity. This law firm has an amazing art collection, and so it wasn't just for a desk, but it was we need a desk, and it needs to showcase our law books, and we have this material. And so we were tasked with something that was so like, this is the end game, and we just had to come up with how to make it work in the visuals. So our solution was to take some of these historical books and to make molds of them. And so you can see that we cast some of them, and they're cast out of different colored resins. And so we were playing with like the illumination of the law and text and different ways that we access that now via like illuminated screens instead of these books. And so playing with that quality of light. And then on the top of the desk is glass that was sandblasted with a lot of historical cases that the firm had worked on. I'm going to go through this one.
This is a piece called the Mini Mart City Park. And we started this about 6 or 7 years ago. We originally responded to a call through the monorail project where they had bought up all the properties for future stops in the monorail. And in Seattle, that got voted down. So the project kind of got shelved. But our idea was to kind of plant a park inside this old mini mart. And that led to...
That led to what has taken the last 6 years of our time. A lot of bureaucracy, forming a separate nonprofit for this project. We've gone through 4 environmental studies, hundreds of thousands of dollars in environmental assessments that we've raised funds for, all to kind of do this. So long story short, this gas station is right across the street from Boeing Field. It stored 40,000 gallons of fuel for Boeing during the war. It was a small family-owned and operated thing. They've all since passed away. We signed a lease on it 6 years ago with the option to purchase it because we wanted to turn it into this park and this public art project. When we signed the lease, there was a letter from Ecology in the mid-'80s that said it had been cleaned up, no further action is needed. We started developing plans. We met with the DPD. We challenged zoning and all these different things. And then we had an environmental consultant that we talked to say, I think there might be more going on than meets the eye.
You might want to check
again. And he helped us apply for a grant that did another assessment, and we drilled down to the groundwater. And so this is on the old Duwamish River, which was straightened, and so it's on fill. Just keep going. Anyway, it was a worst case scenario. They uncovered an unknown plume of petroleum and diesel that was huge, and nobody knew that was there. And it was migrating towards the Duwamish River that we're 4 blocks from. That was already a Superfund site. We applied for funding from the EPA to do further assessments. They stepped in. They considered for a year with their lawyers whether or not to make the Superfund just bigger to encompass our property and all the neighboring properties. Ultimately decided to treat it as its own. There's no responsible party, which means there's nobody to pay for it. And so we have become the responsible party. We've decided that we're committed to this. We've invested all this time and resource and money, and we want to create a model for how these small sites can be dealt with. So we created a nonprofit. That nonprofit bought the property about a year ago. We are getting ready to enter the voluntary cleanup program. We're trying to identify funding sources. And yeah, it's ongoing. It will be something great at some point in the near future. So maybe not near.
Basically, there's hundreds of thousands of these sites all throughout the United States, and it costs too much money to actually deal with them. And so what we're proposing is an alternative and creative way to make these sites more usable and more like a community center or parks and whatnot. So these are some of the plans.
We are currently working on a show for a gallery that we work with. So the next work that we're going to show you is going to be a bunch of sculpture and gallery work. We're working on some objects that are kind of coming back to this. And so we're actually canning some of the dirt. The Department of Ecology and the EPA says that this 5,300 square foot lot that's 20 feet deep, well, I mean, it's deeper, but we have to go down to 20 feet to remove all of that soil. That's really the only way to get a clean bill of health. But the problem with that is it's really expensive. And to dig down and excise that wound, to take that 20 feet, the solution is to haul it to Eastern Oregon and just put it in another landfill. And it doesn't clean anything up. It doesn't get rid of a problem. What it does is it creates more pollution in the long run. It consumes more petroleum than is actually in the ground there to begin with. And there are ways that, like natural attenuation and bioremediation and all these different things that just isn't, like, it's not the approved method. It's not the big lobbyists that got that, policy approved. And so we're going to hopefully impact policy. What we don't want to do is spend millions of dollars and tons of time to just move pollution from one place to another. We want to propose something that's actually sustainable, that is worth the time, that is cost effective, that actually communities can go in and do this. We want to create a model that people can actually say, yeah, that actually makes sense, instead of nobody's going to touch that gas station because there's no economic benefit. It's insanely prohibitive in many ways. So that tube on the left is at about 13 feet down, and that's just sludge. This is a picture of us on the Duwamish River, kind of playing with that. But where I was going is we're canning dirt. They say we got to get rid of it, and we're canning it. We bought a soup canner, and we're canning it, and we're making these objects for the show to kind of illustrate that. And it'll go back to the idea of the puzzles. Like, we want people to take collective ownership in this. We want somebody to buy a can of soup, can of dirty dirt, knowing that that money will go towards the actual help and cleanup. But it's something that you own, you possess, you're responsible for. Okay, done. This is a model we made of it.
About 5 minutes.
Okay, we'll play us through.
This is an installation view of a show we had at Larimore Project. This is our second show, and this is more just straight sculpture. So this is a piece called Flight Path. Choose one.
I'm just trying to go quicker.
Go ahead.
Flight Path.
This was a sculpture called To Make Ends Meet.
This is 538 words etched onto river rock, and it was from we had a scathing review of one of our performance pieces from a critic that kind of took things personally, and this was our way of making something out of that.
These are mirrors that we take from bar bathrooms and make copies of them and then etch them, and they're in essence prints of throwaway objects.
We've been working for a long time on a series of bronze objects, on taking kind of these ordinary objects, these institutional objects, and making them permanent, making them last the test of time. So this is a bronze picture frame that's kind of wilted, and bronze stanchions and rope, and so the rope is cast bronze as well, called Masterpiece. This is a convex mirror, kind of playing with form and function. A lot of polishing of that material to make it reflect light instead of emit light. So we do a lot of large-scale works, or the public works, and this studio work is kind of what keeps that thread going, like keeps us working in betweens, and it's something that we can control the outcomes from, and it's how we all met together in the first place, was making objects. None of the videos are working. There we go. It's disco ball, just polished bronze. We went away this last fall for a residency at the McDowell Colony, and did this portrait project.
This is called Three's a Crowd. This is just the three of us in hundreds and hundreds of different shots.
And that was supposed to lead into a bunch of drawings that we were going to show you, but they didn't reproduce well on the screen, so we took them out. And these are a couple things we're working on right now.
The working title for this is Big Top Grandstand. That might change in the next couple of months, but that's the placeholder right now. So we're fabricating this right now, and it's a series of trailers that all nest inside of each other, sort of like Russian dolls, and then pop up. It's all actuated by a scissor lift, and when it's fully telescoped up, it'll be 35 feet tall. It's all resting on a 16-foot trailer, and this is what our summer is going to be. We're going to debut this at the Nuit Blanche Festival in Toronto in the beginning of October.
This is another public piece we're doing for a high school in Woodinville, Washington, and we're making 9 of these cast resin falcons, and they asked us to do a sculpture for their school, and we decided to use the entire campus as the site. And so these falcons are going to be on these branches and placed all throughout the building.
This is a early version of a piece that we're expanding upon. It's called Ring of Fire, and it's just kind of repurposed lamps that are interactive. So there's a series of proximity sensors and motion controllers, and it's kind of dimming and is supposed to resemble a fire.
And this is kind of jumping off of the Louisville project with the small moons, where we really loved the lamps in there, and we decided to kind of take one of those elements and kind of push it a little bit further.
We were thinking about like the fireplace, not the fireplace, but the fire is what we used to gather around and tell stories, and that's where culture kind of emerged, and how that's largely lost to us now. And we have these very functional objects that people discard now because they don't match your decor. How we've tamed light and it means nothing. How we've tamed heat, and so we have these lamps, but like, oh, it doesn't match my curtains anymore, and so it's now given away for free, and it's sitting on a shelf in a Value Village for 99 cents. And there's no reason that we need new lamps. So anyway, that's it.
On that note.
45 on the dot.
Do you guys have any questions for us? Yes.
We haven't figured that out yet, but it'll be very affordable.
And it's really mostly dirt.
Yeah, it's not quite that deep yet. We're working on the design and all that stuff and actually canning right now. But it's going to be, we have a show at Greg Casera's September 5th, somewhere. I think that's when it opens. But we haven't seen that. But we want them to be really affordable. We want people to take them, but we just have to balance out how much the canner, we have to recoup our costs on it. So, but yes, not. There will be a bronze edition for those people that are willing to spend, higher donor levels.
It's the fancy dirty dirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you point to one project or another that's giving you more exposure than others? Because some of these seem like to be hardly a lot of exposure in some of
It's the island without question. That's like the one thing that always gets brought up is.
Oh, you did that. You were the island.
I mean, we had a news helicopter circling around us, and there are people that don't know anything about us or anything about our work, but they know about 3 guys that built an island in 2006. So.
The trailer park was kind of nice as well, because that lasted for a few years, and we took it out. And then when we were showing Kentucky, they made a new one for us, and so that was touring there as well. So that's gotten a lot of exposure for us, and it's just a really fun piece as well.
I'm curious about the working or creating relationship that you guys have over time. I imagine it's maybe evolved to where you can't all do the same stuff all the time. Like, is somebody more the hydraulic guy or somebody more the agent? How has that changed over time?
It's really organic. Each project is so different from the other that we're always kind of shifting roles and doing that. I mean, there are things that I think we all individually like doing better than others, but we try to actively not limit ourselves to that. And so we do like to have our hands in most things, but I think where that separates is a lot of the studio work. Sometimes it's just the dividing of labors and the working on multiple projects at the same time. And so I might have my hand more so in this, and Zach is in this, and Ben's in this, but we're all making decisions and kind of working together and kind of going back and forth and trying to share that. So it's not any one set thing. It's pretty fluid, and I think it needs to be for us to.
And there are roles like the business side of someone deals more with insurance, someone deals more with the book, someone deals more with this or that. You can settle into those roles, but the creative side kind of jumps around.
Yeah, there's a lot of really non-fun business stuff involved. The proposal phases, all of those things can just go on and on and on. And we figure it out.
So how do you resolve your artistic differences
I spend most of my time trying to convince them that my idea is the best.
I pretty much do the same thing.
I don't know.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
2 against 1. It'll come down to a vote, but I feel like most of the time it might take a while to get there, but we all eventually agree. But there's a lot. I mean, we sit around and talk a lot before we make anything.
And there's also like, if you lose on this one, you're more than likely going to get your way in another situation. And there's so many decisions to be made all the time that you can't like hold everyone precious. And if you do, I mean, we would never have made it if we were able to be like, okay, that's a good idea, I'll roll with it, or like be flexible with those things.
And I think ultimately, like, we all believe in each other and have that faith that, like, no matter, like, some things are, like, if you give a little bit, like, the end result we're always proud of. And that's it, is like, it feels true and collaborative and not any one of our voices. And, yeah. I mean, if we were only making bronze sculptures or doing that, I think that might get, like, the process might wear on us. But because there's so many different things, and some things that are long-term and we keep shepherding along, and other things that are kind of the quicker, it's like that we have plenty to kind of, this is getting frustrating, or I don't need to, it's like we can change our focuses.
I mean, the last, like, a month has been, like, in our conversation, it's going between falcons and plungers and smoke alarms and a scissor lift and lamp piles, and so there's
aluminum composites.
There's
and
so
it's just
many
like,
different things to deal with it. I think sometimes our conversations from the outside would be hilarious, but not right now.
Yeah. Anything else? Sometimes we finish each other's sentences.
Could you tell a story about the Chinese restaurant and the ducks he had hanging in the window?
Zach can tell.
Well, these guys
This is a good example of the previous question.
insisted on hanging real ducks in the restaurant in, I think it was July, and there's like 6 Peking ducks just hanging in the restaurant, and I was like, well, it's July, the gallery's not air conditioned, there's no refrigeration, you're just going to leave these ducks, and they're like, no, we're going to shellac them, and that'll keep them from rotting. And I'm like, well, it's a 6-week show, we're just going to like leave these ducks here. Like, let's just make faux ducks. We can get some rubber chickens, and we'll just make it work. And these guys were like, no, they got to be real ducks.
It was important.
So I think it was maybe week 2, the gallerist was like, you guys have to get rid of these ducks. And I was like, I'm not dealing with these ducks because I told you guys.
So we were wearing.
So these guys were in
masks.
full like hazmat, and they're wearing respirators, and
It smelled awful.
it was terrible. And
so
I told you
we threw
so.
them, and then we got faux ducks, and Zach was like, "I told you so."
And I still love talking about that.
It was a good learning experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime now that there's a question, Zach's like, "Can you remember the ducks?" Well, thanks a lot for having us.
Thank you.
So I realized I was supposed to get something from you that Jamie is going to try and get from you now, because when we put the video online, we have your video, but we also like to have the PowerPoint so we can put
Okay.
image files.
Okay.
Is it a PowerPoint?
I've got a Keynote, but it can export as PowerPoint.
That's fine. I think Jamie is going to be over here in a second
Okay.
to double check if I did my job.
Okay.
You're telling them about the flash
Yes, I
drive?
was telling
Okay,
them
cool.
just about that.
Cool. So this is the drive that I would love to get your PowerPoint on or your
Okay.
keynote. Or
And so I just wanted, like, we didn't really
Sure.
know that you were recording it, or is it like how's it being used?
I have. Oh, sorry.